So I am on this gorgeous little mountain, and there is this shield that could tell me which path to take and how long it is, but it's completely frozen, as you can see, and I'm not able to scrape it off with my fingers. So I'm using the backspacer of the Recon to scrape it off. It's gonna take a while. Hey, what's up people? In today's video I will show you the cold steel Recon1 clip point. Now I'm on a little trip where I do 2 mountains in 2 days. This is the end of the second day. There is barely any sun left, so I might have to walk back in the dark, but I'm using this little gap of opportunity where the wind comes down, hopefully for the entirety of this video, so I can show you the knife that has been with me on this little trip. Now I haven't taken the Recon1 hiking or camping too often. It's more of a knife when I need a big knife that is very slicey and has a lot of stability. One thing I realized lately, that one of the great things about the Recon1 is that it is very stable along the spine. You have a fixed spine, I think 3.5 millimeters. Then you have the triad lock, which is a very stable system, and then that goes over into an aluminium backspacer. I think it's 5051 aluminum, if I'm correctly. Might even be heat treated. Yeah, those are heat treated as well. And yeah, this one is my favorite version of the Recon1 that ever existed. As you know, I have a bunch of Recons. In this video I'm only gonna show you this knife, because I've done videos about the Recon1 in the past where I've shown you my entirety of my collection. So unlike in my last video where I showed you every single blade shape of the Voyager, in this video I'm only gonna show you the clip point, because this is my favorite version of this knife. And yeah, in this case with CTS XHP steel, hollow ground, very thin and slicey behind the edge. Now XHP is an interesting steel. I've heard people say that it is a high edge retention 440C or a higher corrosion resistant D2. I think both of these claims are not accurate, because XHP behaves very differently to 440C or D2. But they are not wrong, because XHP has been based on 440C. So when the idea of XHP was to combine the features of D2 and 440C, so they wanted more edge retention but also more corrosion resistance and more toughness than D2 has, and they called it, I think, 440C XH or 40CP is another name for that steel. And then, but 440C and D2 are both cast steels, and XHP is a PM steel. So the first version of XHP was called 440C PM, excuse me, and XHP is another version of that, made by Carpenter Steel. It's not used a lot anymore, because Carpenter seemed to have a lot of issues supplying the steel in a greater number. So yeah, what is it basically? It has a lot of carbon, a lot of chromium, 16% chromium, a little bit vanadium. So it forms hard carbides, it forms a lot of chromium carbides, a lot of vanadium carbides, and the carbides have a good size. They're not too big, so the steel is not super brittle, but they are larger carbides than some of the other PM steels have, which gives it a lot of wear resistance. Now, the tests you find on XHP online, they vary quite a bit, and they're not very precise, because, you know, if you compare knives and they have different geometries, different heat treatments, different hardnesses, it's hard to do a comparison that's very accurate. So I'm only speaking of my experience with XHP so far. I have multiple knives in XHP, and I've used all of them quite extensively. I have a Spyderco Chaparral that I've used quite a bit in XHP, and then this Recon I've used also a lot over the last couple of years. And so my experience with XHP from Spyderco and from Cold Steel is that it has a higher wear resistance than S30V. Okay, so it's pretty good in wear resistance, because S30V is not bad at all, but it has a lot more toughness, a lot more stability at the edge than S30V. But it's certainly not as good as S35VN in terms of the stability at the edge. So it can chip, but it's not as bad as S30V, but it can happen sometimes. Now also the resharpening, I think S30V and S35VN are both better in resharpening. Once this knife gets dull, or once any knife with XHP gets dull, it's quite a pain in the ass to resharpen XHP, to be honest. So what I found is the same thing that I've done with a lot of my knives, is I never let it get dull completely. So I strop it quite a bit, and XHP strops back really easy for how long the edge holds. So it has a really high edge retention, but it's also restroppable, which is not the case with most PM steels, really. I think most PM steels have quite some trouble stropping back, but XHP comes back nicely on the leather. And also, if you take it to fine ceramic, if it doesn't strop back, take it to fine ceramic for your next step. Yeah, then it's gonna pop back very easily. The razor sharpness comes back super easily. And as you can see, this is a very wide blade. It's super thin behind the edge, it's a hollow ground blade. This will outlast me, probably. And the good thing about this, because this was my favorite version and I was kind of worried when this was discontinued, I bought another one, so I have the same knife in a new condition if I ever outuse this, which is very unlikely. I'm probably not gonna outuse it, but you know, maybe I lose it, break it, it gets taken away from me when I go to another country or something on the airport, who knows. So I have a new one as well, but this one I'm gonna use this until it dies before I use the new one. I love it quite a bit. Yeah, corrosion resistance, we haven't talked about that. So high edge retention, I would say decent toughness for how high the edge retention is, decent stability at the edge, I think. And corrosion resistance is less than you would think it is. As I said before, it has 16% chromium, but there are a couple of steels that have high chromium but are not as corrosion resistant. So for instance, CDP 189 is another one that has 20% chromium but is really not that good at corrosion resistance. Why is that? And why is also that steel not as corrosion resistant? It's because that chromium is bound into carbides, which give it the high edge retention, but it's not in the solution in the steel, so it doesn't form the protective layer as good with the majority of its chromium content. It's bound up in carbides, but it's not there for the corrosion resistance. It's just there for the edge retention. So the steel is not as high in corrosion resistance as you would think it is, but with a DLC coating like this, it's really not an issue. I found with my Spyderco Chaparral though, when I take it hiking and I sweat on it, the salts in my sweat will put some rust spots on there pretty easily. So XHP is not good against salts or salt water or sweat, but other than that, it's pretty good. But if you store away a knife in XHP without a coating for a number of years, I would definitely put some protective oil or knife wax on it, so you don't have any issues with that. But yeah, XHP is a great steel. I really like it. I think it's sad that it's not used as much anymore. But yeah, like I said, resharpening it is kind of a pain in the ass. You have to restrop it regularly. Otherwise you will have not the best experience on the stones. It doesn't take edge super easily and super well. So yeah, diamond stones need to be used for sure, but also with those, it doesn't want to take an edge as easily. This is a great knife for winter because it has a large handle, and as you can see, operating it with gloves is relatively easy. The Recon1 might be the best tactical knife that has ever been around. There's really not a lot of competition to this knife. because most tactical knives, they're really heavy, and this is not a lightweight knife either. This is like, I don't know, probably like 5 ounces. Didn't brought my scale up to the mountain. But yeah, probably like a 5-ounce knife, so that would be 140 to 150 grams. It's not the lightest knife, but comparing the strength to the largeness of the knife is really big. Has a 4-inch 10-centimeter blade, really wide blade, a thick piece of back spring, and also a thick piece of aluminum. It's not that heavy for what it is, for the size that it has. And most knives that are in this genre, they are just heavy, but they have a really weak locking system. Here you have the triad lock, which is a really stable locking system and holds up to any kind of abuse, really. It's really strong. No liners because you don't need them. On the Voyagers you have liners because that's FRN, and underneath those FRN scales you want some liners to make it a little bit more stable. But on G10 don't need it because all the strength is up here on the spine, and like I said, a lot of strength around the spine. The tip is fine and pointy, has a nice wedge. This has the finest point from all the Recons. Like I said, I did another video about with my entire Recon1 collection, where you can compare the blade shapes a little bit easier, because I showed the Tanto and the spear point also there. But yeah, like I said, this is my most favorite version of the Recon1. The clip point is the sliciest blade they have. The Tanto is more like a, it's a little bit harder use, but it's also not as good as in cutting tasks. This is much more slicey. The spear point is somewhat in between. But yeah, I like this one. I like the full slicing capability of this. It's such a nice blade shape. I love it. Now, if there is one downside to this, is that this gap between handle and blade and cutting edge is really long. Yeah, you can choke up, but it doesn't feel as good. So if you cut from back here, you don't have as good of control. This is like more of a, you can really see the tacticalness of this knife in this grip, right? But you lose cutting ability because you're so far away from the cutting edge. So this is the only negative thing I have to say about this. The crazy thing is that this was 150 euros back then in XHP hollow ground, and now you pay 200 euros for flat ground S35 yen. And like I said, S35 yen, it's not a bad steel. It's a little bit tougher at the edge, but yeah, it's not as high in edge retention. And I think XHP is just a step above S35 yen. I think it's the better steel, and it's the better grind on here. So yeah, this one was cheaper, with a better steel and a better ground blade. So yeah, I'm not sure if the Recon is still as competitive in the price range that it is now in, but luckily I have enough Recons for my entire life in my collection. Might even sell a couple of them. I might get rid of the Tanto because I just use the clip point and the spear point more. And I like the Voyager Tanto more than the Recon1 Tanto. Some people might disagree, but yeah, that's fine. You know, for everybody there's something. And I think this one has the highest quality. I don't know what it is about the XHP Recons, but to me they were always the highest quality Recons. They had just the best build quality for some reason. They had the best ground blades and the best steel. I love this knife. This will be in my collection forever. Yeah, such a great knife. So that's it for today's video. Thank you guys for watching. I have to make my way down from this mountain before it gets dark, which it probably will. Anyways, thank you guys for watching. Maybe we see each other in another video. Goodbye, people.